That house belongs to Ethan now. You were never part of this family anyway. My stepmother said those words while ripping my grandmother's portrait off the living room wall and dropping it into a cardboard box. I watched the glass crack across my grandmother's face. The same grandmother who raised me until I was 11. The same grandmother whose house I was standing in. The house she left to me in her will. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I picked up the cracked portrait, tucked it under my arm, and walked out. Before I tell you how I put my stepmother and my father in handcuffs 6 days later, tell me in the comments, what is the one thing your family stole from you that you can never get back? I read every single story. I drove to my studio apartment in downtown Columbus with my grandmother's broken portrait on the passenger seat. I kept glancing at it like she might say something. She had this look in the photo, chin slightly lifted, half smile, like she knew something everyone else didn't. She probably did. She probably knew exactly what would happen after she died. She just hoped I'd be strong enough to handle it. I am Elena. I am 31 years old, and I work as a senior forensic auditor at one of the Big Four accounting firms. My job is to follow money that doesn't want to be followed. I trace hidden accounts, shell companies, offshore transfers. I find the lie buried inside the spreadsheet. Companies pay my firm $200,000 for me to sit in a conference room and tell them exactly how their CFO has been stealing from them. But for 9 years, I never thought to audit my own family. My mother died when I was 11. Ovarian cancer. Fast and cruel. My grandmother, my mother's mother, stepped in and raised me in her little blue house on Maple Ridge Drive. It wasn't fancy. 3 bedrooms, a garden with tomatoes that never quite ripened, and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon, but it was safe. It was mine. Then my father met Diana. Diana was polished. Blonde highlights, white teeth, real estate license, and a 7-year-old son named Ethan from her first marriage. She moved in fast. 6 months after their first date, she had a ring. A year later, my grandmother died of a stroke, and suddenly the only person standing between me and Diana was gone. My grandmother's will was simple. The house on Maple Ridge went to me, to be held in trust until I turned 25. My father was named trustee. I remember the lawyer reading it out loud in his small office while Diana sat in the corner, tapping her nails on the armrest. She didn't say anything that day. She didn't need to. She had 9 years to work with. I sat on my couch that night, still in my work clothes, laptop open, grandmother's portrait leaning against the wall. My hands were steady. My mind was doing what it does best: cataloging, connecting, calculating. Here's what I knew. I turned 25 6 years ago. The house should have transferred to me. It never did. Every time I asked my father about it, he said the same thing. The market's not right. Let me handle it. You don't want to sell your grandmother's house in a down market. And I believed him, because he was my father, and because I was too busy building my career to question the one person I thought I could trust. But tonight, Diana had made a mistake. She told me the house belonged to Ethan. Not we're thinking about it or your father and I discussed it. She said it like it was already done, like the paperwork was signed, sealed, and filed. I opened my laptop and started where I always start: public records. The county assessor's website loaded slowly. I typed in the address, 4,417 Maple Ridge Drive. And there it was. Owner of record, Ethan James Whitfield. Transfer date, 14 months ago. Transfer type, quitclaim deed. My stomach dropped, but my brain kicked into gear. A quitclaim deed means someone signed over their interest in the property. The grantor listed on the deed was Elena Marie Whitfield, me, my name, my signature, except I never signed anything. I zoomed in on the scanned document. The signature was close. Someone had practiced, but they made the same mistake forgers always make. They focused on making it look pretty. My real signature is messy, fast, with a hard downstroke on the E that almost tears the paper. This one was smooth, careful, drawn, not written. My father forged my signature and gave my grandmother's house to my stepbrother. I sat there for a long time. The laptop hummed, the city noise filtered through my window, and I let myself feel it for exactly 60 seconds. The betrayal, the rage, the grief of realizing that the man who was supposed to protect my inheritance had handed it to a stranger's son. Then I closed my eyes, took a breath, and opened them. 60 seconds was all I could afford, because when I pulled up the property tax records, I saw something worse. There was a mortgage on the house, a big one, $1.2 million, taken out 11 months ago, 3 months after the fraudulent transfer. The borrower was Ethan James Whitfield. The co-signer was Diana Whitfield, and the property used as collateral was my grandmother's house. They didn't just steal my house. They leveraged it. They took out a loan against an asset they had no legal right to, using a forged document to establish ownership. That's not a family disagreement. That's federal mortgage fraud. I started building the case the way I build every case, systematically, emotionlessly, like the house didn't smell like cinnamon, like the garden didn't have my grandmother's fingerprints in the soil. I spent the next 4 hours pulling everything I could find. The LLC Ethan had registered 6 months ago, Whitfield Ventures, with no employees, no revenue, and a business address that matched Diana's yoga studio. The 3 credit cards opened in my name that I didn't know about, all maxed out, all signed with that same careful forgery. The second mortgage application, this one denied, where someone had listed my income and my employer without my knowledge. By dawn, I had a folder on my desktop with 47 documents. I named it Family Audit, and I knew 3 things. First, my father had been complicit in this for at least 2 years. He was the trustee. He signed off on the transfer. He let Diana orchestrate the whole thing. Second, Diana wasn't just greedy. She was organized. This wasn't impulsive. It was a campaign. She had systematically stripped my identity, my credit, and my inheritance to fund her son's lifestyle and her own. Third, and this was the part that made my jaw tighten, they were about to do it again. I found an email chain, forwarded carelessly to a shared family account that no one had bothered to remove me from. Diana was in negotiations to sell the house, my grandmother's house, for $850,000. Closing date, next Tuesday. 7 days. I had 7 days before my grandmother's house, the last physical piece of my mother's family, would be sold to a stranger, and the money would vanish into Ethan's hollow LLC and Diana's offshore accounts. I closed my laptop. I showered. I put on my sharpest blazer, and I went to work. Not my regular work, the other kind. My phone rang at noon. It was my father. Elena, honey. His voice had that careful tone he used when Diana was coaching him from the next room. Your stepmother told me about last night. I think there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated. The house situation is complicated. Tax stuff. You wouldn't want the liability anyway. Ethan needed a place to establish his business. And we thought, you thought I wouldn't notice that you forged my signature on a quitclaim deed and transferred my property to your stepson? Silence. Long, hollow silence. I could almost hear Diana in the background, whispering. Elena, his voice hardened. You need to be very careful about what you're accusing people of. I'm not accusing anyone yet, Dad. I'm just reading public records. Listen to me. Now he sounded like the man I grew up with. Not the gentle widower. The one who emerged after Diana moved in. The one who chose comfort over his own daughter. If you make trouble over this, you'll tear this family apart. Is that what you want? Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. I gripped the phone so hard the case creaked. He was weaponizing my grandmother. The woman whose house he stole. The woman whose portrait his wife threw in a box. Don't you ever say her name to me again, I said. And tell Diana to enjoy the house while she can. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from restraint. Because what I wanted to do was drive to that house and scream until the neighbors called the police. But that's what they expected. That's what they were prepared for. An emotional daughter they could dismiss as unstable. They weren't prepared for an audit. I called Rebecca Chen, an old law school friend who had become an assistant district attorney specializing in white-collar crime. We hadn't talked in months, but she picked up on the second ring. Elena, please tell me you're calling to grab dinner. I'm calling because I need to report forgery, identity theft, and mortgage fraud, and the suspect is my father. I heard her chair creak as she sat up straight. Tell me everything. I told her. All of it. The forged quitclaim deed, the fraudulent mortgage, the stolen identity, the credit cards, the shell company, the pending sale. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Elena, if even half of this is documented the way you're describing, this isn't just a state case. The mortgage fraud alone makes it federal. Wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, that's FBI territory. I know, I said. That's why I'm calling you and not a family therapist. She didn't laugh. I'll contact the field office today. Can you send me everything? Already in your inbox. Encrypted. Password is Nana's maiden name. Stay away from them, Elena. Don't confront them again. Don't go to the house. Let us work. I promised. And for 3 days, I kept that promise. I went to work. I came home. I stared at my grandmother's cracked portrait and waited. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, because every hour that passed was an hour closer to Tuesday, an hour closer to losing the house forever. On the fourth day, Rebecca called. We've got a federal warrant for the financial records. The FBI has been looking at Whitfield Ventures already. Turns out your stepbrother filed for a PPP loan during the pandemic using your social security number. He got $93,000. He bought a boat. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of course he did. Of course, Ethan bought a boat with my stolen identity during a pandemic. It was so perfectly, grotesquely on brand. There's more, Rebecca said. The forensic team found a pattern. Diana has done this before. Before she married your father, she was married to a man named Gerald Foss in Michigan. He died of a heart attack. Within a year, she had transferred his assets to her name and sold his family's property. Gerald's daughter tried to sue, but Diana had already moved to Ohio and changed her last name. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. Diana wasn't just an opportunist. She was a predator. And my father wasn't her partner. He was her latest mark. She married him for access to my grandmother's house, to my trust, to me. Can we stop the sale? I asked. Already done. Emergency injunction filed this morning. The title company has been notified. That house isn't going anywhere. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. But Elena, we need something more for the arrest warrants. We need them to acknowledge the forgery. On record. Right now, your father could claim he didn't know Diana forged your name. He could say he trusted her to handle the paperwork. A good defense attorney would create enough doubt. What do you need? A conversation. Recorded. Where one or both of them admit they knew the signature was forged. Ohio is a one-party consent state. You just need to be in the room. I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. I'll do it. But I have an idea. Something better than a phone call. This is where being a forensic auditor paid off. I didn't just know numbers. I knew people. I knew how they behaved when money was on the line. And I knew my stepmother's greatest weakness. She couldn't resist a bigger score. I called my father the next morning. I made my voice small, tired, defeated. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about tearing the family apart. I don't want that. I could hear the relief flood his voice. Sweetheart, I knew you'd come around. Diana and I, we want what's best for everyone. I want to sit down with you and Diana and Ethan, all of us. I have a proposal, something that works for everyone. Can we meet Saturday? At the house? Of course. Of course we can. I'll tell Diana. She'll be thrilled. She wouldn't be thrilled. She'd be suspicious. But greed always beats suspicion. That's the first rule of fraud investigation. Saturday morning, I drove to Maple Ridge Drive for the last time. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The tomato garden was gone, replaced by a concrete patio with outdoor furniture that still had the price tags on it. Diana's touch. Replace anything with a soul, with something that has a price tag. I carried a leather folder under my arm. Inside were 2 documents I'd prepared myself. The first was a fake settlement agreement, offering to relinquish all claims to the house in exchange for a one-time payment of $200,000. It was designed to look reasonable, tempting, the kind of deal a tired, beaten-down daughter would offer just to make it stop. The second document was the real one, but they wouldn't see it until it was too late. I also carried something in my blazer pocket. My phone, recording, one-party consent, legal, admissible. Diana opened the door in full makeup, wearing a white linen dress, like she was hosting a garden party instead of meeting the stepdaughter she had robbed. Elena. So glad you came to your senses. My father sat at the kitchen table, looking older than I remembered, tired, gray. He didn't meet my eyes. He knew what he'd done. He just didn't have the spine to admit it. Ethan was on the couch, scrolling his phone, barely acknowledging me. 25 years old, never held a job longer than 3 months, living in my grandmother's house, spending money borrowed against my stolen identity, the golden child, the product the whole family was forced to buy. I sat down and opened my folder. I'm willing to let the house go, I said. I kept my voice measured, quiet. But I need you to be honest with me first. I need to understand what happened. Diana smiled, that careful, practiced smile. What's to understand? Your father managed the trust and made a decision about the property. It's all perfectly legal. Diana, I said, looking directly at her. We both know my signature on that quitclaim deed isn't real. The room went still. My father's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Ethan looked up from his phone for the first time. Diana's smile didn't waver, But something shifted behind her eyes. A calculation. She was deciding whether to deny it or reframe it. Your father signed on your behalf, she said smoothly. He had trustee authority. Trustee authority expired when I turned 25, 6 years ago. The deed was filed 14 months ago, and it has my signature on it, not his. Someone forged my name. My father set down his coffee cup. Elena, let me finish, Dad. I'm not angry. I just need to understand the thinking. Was it your idea or Diana's? And this is where narcissists always fail. They can't share credit, even for crimes. Diana jumped in before my father could speak. It was a practical decision. Ethan needed a stable address for his business. Your father agreed that since you weren't using the house, so you both decided to sign my name. We did what was best for the family, Diana said, her voice rising slightly. You weren't here. You were off in your little apartment playing detective with spreadsheets. Someone had to make decisions. And the mortgage? The $1.2 million borrowed against the house? Was that also for the family? My father's face went white. He hadn't expected me to know about that. Diana didn't flinch. Ethan's business needed capital. The house was just sitting there. A business with no employees, no revenue, and a PPP loan taken out in my name for $93,000. Now Diana flinched. How do you know about that? Ethan said from the couch. His voice cracked. He sounded like a child who just realized the teacher saw him cheat. Because it's my social security number, Ethan. Every time you steal from me, there's a paper trail. And paper trails are literally my profession. Diana stood up. The performance was over. Her voice turned cold. Fine. Yes, we used your name, your credit, your house, because we needed it and you didn't. Your grandmother left that house to the wrong person. You were a child. Your father and I made the adult decision. If you want to fight about it, get a lawyer. But you'll spend more on legal fees than the house is worth. She was daring me to flinch, to cry, to storm out like the emotional daughter they'd painted me as for 9 years. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the settlement agreement. I don't want to fight. I told you, I have a proposal. $200,000. And I walk away. I sign a release. It's over. Diana looked at the document. Her eyes moved fast. She was calculating. The house was about to sell for $850,000. $200,000 to make me disappear was a bargain. I could see the math happening behind her eyes. Where do I sign? She said. Both of you? I said. I need my father's signature too, since he was the trustee who authorized the transfer. My father reached for the pen. His hand was trembling. For a moment, I thought he might hesitate, might look at me and say something real. Something like, I'm sorry. Or, I was weak. Or, your mother would be horrified. He didn't. He signed. Diana signed. Ethan signed. As a witness. And then I pulled out the second document. Thank you, I said. Now, I need you to know something. This conversation has been recorded under Ohio's one-party consent law. You've just admitted on tape to forging my signature, stealing my identity, committing mortgage fraud, and filing a fraudulent PPP loan. You've also signed a document that wasn't a settlement agreement. Diana grabbed the paper and flipped to the second page. Her face drained of color. It's a sworn affidavit, I said, acknowledging that the quitclaim deed was executed without my knowledge or consent. You just signed a confession. The doorbell rang. I stood up and opened the front door. 2 FBI agents in dark suits stood on the porch. Behind them, 2 local officers. Rebecca Chen was there too, standing by the curb, arms crossed. Diana Whitfield, Robert Whitfield, and Ethan Whitfield, the lead agent said, stepping inside. FBI, White Collar Crime Division. You're under arrest, Diana screamed. Not words, just a sound. A raw animal sound of someone watching their entire construction collapse. She pointed at me, her fingers shaking. She tricked us. She set us up. That recording isn't admissible. I want a lawyer. The recording is perfectly admissible, ma'am, the agent said, guiding her hands behind her back. One-party consent. And we have an independent federal warrant based on a 14-month financial investigation, so the recording is just the cherry on top. My father sat at the table, frozen. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. He just looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not betrayal, recognition, like he was finally seeing me for the first time in 9 years. Elena, he whispered, I'm your father. I picked up my grandmother's portrait from where I'd set it on the counter when I walked in. I held it against my chest. You were her trustee, I said. You were supposed to protect what she left me. Instead, you let your wife pick it apart like a vulture, and you watched. You're not my father. You're the man who held the door open while she robbed me. The cuffs clicked, that small, metallic sound that means the conversation is over. They led my father out first. He walked slowly, head down, like a man leaving a church. Then Ethan, crying, asking if someone could call his friend to come get his car. Always worried about the wrong things. Then Diana. Diana stopped in the doorway. She turned to me one last time. You think you've won? That house is mortgaged to the roof. It's worthless. You've destroyed this family for nothing. I looked at her. The mortgage was obtained through fraud. It'll be voided. The sale is blocked. The house goes back to me, free and clear. I did the math, Diana. I always do the math. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The agent guided her through the door. I stood alone in my grandmother's kitchen. The cinnamon smell was gone, replaced by Diana's candles. Something expensive and soulless. Vanilla and sandalwood. I blew them out, one by one. Then I walked through the house, slowly, room by room. Ethan had turned my old bedroom into a home gym. Diana had gutted the kitchen and installed marble countertops. The garden was gone. The wallpaper my grandmother had picked out, the one with little blue flowers, was painted over in gray. But the bones were the same. The creaky third step, the window in the hallway that never closed all the way, the pencil marks on the doorframe where my grandmother measured my height every birthday. They'd painted over those too, but I could still see the faint lines underneath. I pressed my hand against them. 12 years old, 13, 14, 15, the last one before she died. I didn't cry. Not yet. I'd cry later, alone, with the portrait unframed and the glass replaced. I'd cry when I planted new tomatoes in the garden. I'd cry the first night I slept in that house again, in my old room, with the door locked and no one else inside. But right now, I had work to do. I walked outside into the cold November air. Rebecca was waiting by her car. You okay? She asked. I will be, I said. What happens next? Federal charges for Diana and Ethan. Wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, PPP fraud. Diana's looking at 12 to 15 years, especially with the prior in Michigan. Ethan, probably 5 to 8. Your father. She paused. He cooperated minimally. His attorney might negotiate. But forgery and conspiracy to commit bank fraud, he's looking at 3 to 5. I nodded. 3 to 5 years. My father would spend 3 to 5 years in prison because he chose Diana's approval over his daughter's birthright. Because he was too weak to say no. Because silence was easier than doing the right thing. People want to believe that the quiet parent is innocent, that they're trapped too, that they go along because they're scared. But I've audited hundreds of fraud cases, and I'll tell you the truth. The quiet one always knows. They always see the ledger. They choose not to read it because ignorance is more comfortable than accountability. My father wasn't Diana's victim. He was her silent partner. And silence, when you have the power to speak, is a choice with consequences. I got in my car. I placed my grandmother's portrait carefully on the passenger seat again. She looked back at me with that half smile. That knowing look. I got it back, Nana, I said. I pulled out my phone. Dad's contact. Delete. Diana, block. Ethan, block. The family group chat named Whitfield Bunch that Diana had created and I'd been muted in for years. Leave group. Delete. No victory lap. No dramatic monologue. Just clean, irreversible math. I drove back to my apartment. Monday, I'd start the paperwork to remove the fraudulent mortgage. Tuesday, I'd meet with a contractor about restoring the garden. Wednesday, I'd call the wallpaper company about blue flowers. But today, I just drove. Windows down, November wind sharp against my face. The highway stretched ahead, long and open. I used to think revenge was about making them suffer. Now I know it's quieter than that. Revenge is an audit. You don't scream. You don't cry. You just follow the numbers until they tell the truth. And the truth always balances. If you've ever been the one your family treated as disposable, only to discover you were the strongest one in the room, drop unbreakable in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. Because the thing about karma isn't that it comes for bad people. It's that it comes through the person they underestimated the most.